Welcome to Go a Little Mad, a horror movie podcast. My name is Jason, and I love scary movies.
I'm Briana, and I don't. This week we watched and are discussing The Lodge. And just right at the top, we'll say trigger warning for this episode for mental illness discussions and suicide.
And the death of an animal.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I survived it, though.
Yes, you did. And just to kind of add to that, the topic at hand hit a little close to home for me, so I probably get a little too angry and a little too sweary at the dad in this movie, as I noticed as I was redoing my notes. So, just forgive me if you're like, this guy is just hammering away at the dad. I just can't help it.
Everyone hates the dad. It's fine. It's fine.
He's trash.
Okay, so let's talk about some movie credits. So The Lodge was written by Sergio Caschi, Veronica Franz, and Severin Fiala. It was directed by Severin Fiala and Veronica Franz. And it stars Riley Keough. Is that how you say her name?
It's just Keough, actually.
Riley Keough as Grace, Jaden Martell as Aiden, Leah McHugh as Mia, Richard Armitage as Richard, and, shockingly, Alicia Silverstone as Laura.
And, I mean, she wasn't in a lot of this movie, but she was incredible.
Yes.
She blew it away.
Deserves all the awards.
Yeah, and Jaden Martell, for anybody who might recognize that name, was one of the characters in the It remake. And he was fantastic in this movie, and he's really good in that too.
So this was the first movie that we both watched for the first time.
Yeah. Normally we'd go through our touch points here, and I'd tell you about the first time I saw it. But yeah, this was a first for me. I remember before it came out, I remember hearing about it, wanting to see it, but I never really got around to it, and then it kind of fell off the map for a little bit.
You were supposed to watch it before to save me, but he didn't. He forgot. That's okay. I liked that we kind of both watched it blind, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the idea was to kind of be able to warn her about anything possibly super offensive. Not to warn her about any jump scare that's coming, but if there's anything extremely gross or offensive. But yeah, I just forgot because it's not part of our routine for this, so...
What came into play here was, what was that website? DoesTheDogDie.com.
DoesTheDogDie.com. If you are a horror fan, or anything really, and you're really sensitive about triggers, this is a great website. It people can ask questions and get answers based on their own triggers. It's really informative. I've used it many, many times.
And I love the website name. That's fantastic. A synopsis. So after the unexpected suicide of their mother, Aiden and Mia spend the holiday season at their family cabin with their dad and his girlfriend Grace, who has a dark past. When Richard, their dad, leaves the cabin for business, Grace's past returns to haunt her.
And that's a pretty good summary right there.
Thank you. All right, what are your Rotten Tomatoes score?
So I was a little surprised. Critically, this was 74%, but audience-wise, it was only 51%. So the critics liked it a lot more than the people who saw it at the movies did, which I guess I could understand. It wasn't what I expected going into it.
I think people didn't know what to do with this film.
Yeah, it definitely, we'll discuss it a lot more in detail at the end, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it turns the whole movie on its head a little bit. And so I have to assume that it was just a divisive move. I liked it. I think Briana would agree. It was a quality movie.
Yep.
But I guess it's one of those movies where you either hate it or love it.
And what about your flesh wounds?
Oh, got some good ones here. I got some really good ones here. So the first is, some people may or may not know, that star Riley Keough is the granddaughter of Elvis. We've got some solid family connections and big names in play here. So her dad is musician Michael Keough, who actually played her cultist dad in this movie in flashbacks and voice work. He doesn't really get a lot of screen time. And her mom is Lisa Marie Presley.
Oh.
Yes.
What?
Yes, exactly. So she was married to Michael Keough, but then...
Wait. Lisa Marie Presley?
Lisa Marie Presley.
Isn't that the one who married Michael Jackson?
Yes, if you would let me speak for two more seconds.
She's old enough to be her mom?
I guess so.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so Lisa Marie Presley She was married to Michael Keough. That was her first husband. They got divorced. Her next husband was Nicolas Cage.
No.
Yes, they were married for a couple years. They got divorced. Her next husband was, as you mentioned, Michael Jackson from 94 to 96. I think we were all rooting for those kids. And then her next husband was musician and producer Michael Lockwood. But they just got divorced in 2021. So if you think she's cute, now is the time to shoot your shot. And the second little flesh wound I have is a little more grisly, not quite as fun, but is kind of a cool throwback to me. Grace's dog, as we mentioned, does die in this film. You don't really see it dying, you just see it dead. It freezes to death. So her dog's name is Grady, which was taken from The Shining by Stephen King. That's the name of the former winter caretaker before Jack Nicholson's Jack Torrance comes up, and he asks what happened to him, and they said he went mad and murdered his whole family, which is what Jack Torrance ends up trying to do in The Shining. But at the end of The Shining, do you know how The Shining ends, Brianna?
I sure don't.
Jack freezes to death.
Oh.
Just like Grady.
Oh.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad, but, that's a nod to a beloved horror classic, and that's what I got.
So shall we discuss the film?
Let's do it.
A seasonal favorite, The Lodge.
Yeah, this is a Christmas movie, and I will start right off by saying,
I will say they kept the Christ in Christmas, just to put that out there.
They sure did, and
he's everywhere.
Definitely worth interrupting me mid-sentence. I just wanted to say, this is a great movie. I recognize that this movie does things very well. But I don't recommend anybody watch this movie ever, and I will never watch it myself.
No.
Yeah. Just throwing that out there at the beginning, in case, people don't listen to our scores, maybe, and then you go watch this movie, and you're like, but they said this movie was great. I am so sad now. Well, that's what you get.
Yeah, it is great, and it's also terrible.
Yeah.
As we're kind of setting up to play the movie, by the way, I realized that I was, super scared, and it's because you hadn't watched it yet. So like Jason says, it's not like he tells me specifically that a jump scare is coming or anything. He doesn't spoil things for me, but there's an air of protection if I know that Jason has seen this movie, especially when something involves the paranormal. I'm very anxious about it. Yeah, so I'm finding that I'm more scared when we watch paranormal things, although we haven't really dug into the slashers except for Psycho, but that wasn't scary because it's old. I just felt weird not knowing that you hadn't seen this yet. But we begin with eerie music, which just really sets the tone for the holiday.
Actually, we begin with title cards for the production companies that Brianna complains are too happy for a scary movie.
Oh.
So last week they were too scary. This week they're too happy. I don't know what they could possibly do to win her over now.
It really was. It was bright, and you just know when you're watching a title card to a scary movie, and this was not it. This just wasn't it.
Yeah, you
it's the
felt
only way I can explain it.
You felt like it was trying to reel you in?
Yeah.
Like a bait and switch?
Yeah, trick me,
Okay.
you know? We learned that this is definitely not a holiday film. It just happens to take place at that time. The camera is panning around a cabin, and it's dark, mostly because there's so much wood. There are religious paintings, one of Mary that is kind of dark and eerie because it's she's staring at you. There's a gun, and an echoing voice, maybe a memory or something. There's dolls on the sofa, and then you realize this is a dollhouse. The actual house is very bright. Sunlight is beaming in through every room. And like the opening credits, I feel are we watching a horror movie or not? Because the lighting is too solid. It's too bright.
Yeah, it does a really stark turn there. I really like the opening on the dollhouse, going through the house and then realizing it's a dollhouse. I was uncomfortable already, watching this. It made me uncomfortable. And then it's just bam, daylight, daytime, nothing spooky. You're absolutely right. It was way over bright.
And I guess maybe cinematography-wise, the way they pan around the house kind of room by room, and it's just empty. Well, it's not empty. There's no people in it, I should say. There's a lot of that throughout this whole movie of just panning room by room by room. So Alicia Silverstone, mom, Laura, she peeks into the dollhouse and she's calling for the kids. We kind of watch her get ready. She finishes curling her lashes in the mirror, and then she breaks down crying to herself. And she's clearly struggling with something despite putting on a happy face.
Yeah, and this was like already like as somebody that's dealt with depression, this like hit home. Like that is they did a really good job. She did a really good job of depicting that because it really can be like that sometimes where you're just like happy, smiling, walking through the house, and then all of a sudden, bam.
Yeah.
And it was a really well done shot.
Next, they're all in the car, and Mia, the daughter, is hanging her doll outside the window. The doll is not like a baby doll. It's closer in size to a Barbie, but maybe a bit bigger. And I only point this out because I'm unsure how old she is. So I Googled it, well, at least the actress. How old do you think Mia, the character, is? She's the younger sister.
Yeah, let's see. So, I mean, the older brother, he's probably 16, 15.
Okay.
Not any older because he knows how to drive the truck.
Right.
Later. So he's about 15, 16. I would put her around 12.
Okay. I honestly couldn't decide if she's like 6 or 10 because of the way she acts, the way that she is portrayed, and her overall look. The actress was 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I know I mentioned Jaden Martell earlier, but both of these kids knocked it out of the park. Like, they were amazing actors. I feel like a lot of movies that are heavy on kids can sometimes be bogged down by that, but
they were incredible.
Yeah,
they were
absolutely.
Incredible. And he was, I think, 16 during filming, or maybe 15 during filming, because I just did 2019 when this movie came out. So, yeah, I would say he's like 15. That's what I pegged him at. Laura puts on lipstick in the mirror, and Mia asks, is she going to be there? But Laura doesn't respond. So we gather that the parents are divorced, and the dad, Richard, has moved on, and the kids are not thrilled. They park at Richard's house, and there's a woman in the window that Laura spots. She kind of furrows her brow. So clearly, at drop-off, this woman is not supposed to be around. And you kind of wonder, maybe I'm the only one wondering, maybe we are supposed to know this. Was it like an other woman situation, and that's why they're divorced? That kind of thing.
Yeah, they never really clarify one way or the other, but it definitely felt that way.
Yeah.
It felt like if it wasn't, if she wasn't the other woman, it at least happened very quickly after the split up.
Yeah. Before the kids even drop their bags, Richard greets them with money to go get candy because he says that he needs to talk to their mom.
What a fun dad.
Yeah, so it's going to be a great convo probably too. As they go, though, like they're kind of going back and Laura's coming up the stairs. She's like, what's happening? And Mia explains they're going to get candy. And Laura says, and Mia responds with like, all organic, no artificial sweeteners. And that is very Alicia Silverstone. And I truly wonder, did she talk to the writers and was like, let's add this in about candy?
So we discussed this like when we watched the scene. And I also had in my notes like, what a fun mom, like sarcastically, like if you're going to let your kids have candy, let them have candy. But
No.
I will say the further we got in the movie and the more I thought about it, she is very religious in probably a little bit of a harmful way, and raised her kids to be the same. So I think it may be more of that thing, like just sort of, they don't get a lot of candy because candy is, evil and they're sinners.
Maybe, yeah. I didn't get negative religious vibes from the mom, though, because her, like, again, and I'm going to talk about this later, but, like, her house is so bright and happy, and there's some religious symbolism. There's more at the cabin, I would say, than there is in the house, at least from what we saw. And the kids don't seem negatively impacted by religion compared to Grace, for example.
Well, yeah, I mean, Grace is obviously, like, that's a whole different ballpark.
Well, but I think that was the point. I think we were supposed to see, like, there's a normal side of religion, and then there's a really bad side to it, too, maybe.
Yeah, but I still got the strong vibes from Alicia Silverstone because she's the one that decorated the lodge to look like that.
True.
She hung the painting of Mary. And, not to get too far ahead of it, but also the daughter's reaction after, she dies.
Yeah,
that
true.
seemed a little much to me.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating.
No, it's final. You're correct.
Okay, I'll take it. I'm going to record that and use it later.
You don't know how to edit.
How dare you?
Richard and Laura go into the kitchen, and Laura leans in the doorway. I think she might have her arms crossed, but it's truly just like the official signifier of like, this is not my house and I am uncomfortable here.
She just conveyed so well, and again, maybe this was like me putting myself into it, but she conveyed so well of somebody that was really hurting in this moment and was trying so hard to like keep it together.
Yeah. She glances at the window and sees the girlfriend like is in the backyard, but Richard says she's not here.
Yeah, she's ducking out the back door.
And I wrote, I do not like this man. I do not like him, Sam I am. I just added the Sam I Am part now. I didn't write that. He offers her a drink and she says she'll have coffee, and he apologizes for only having instant. And I think it's because of the girlfriend. But overall, like, he says, like, oh, because, and it implies that, like, before they drank regular coffee and now he doesn't, which is just like, yeah, I'm a different person now.
And he also offers her coffee, seemingly knowing she hates instant coffee. And then is like, sorry, I only have instant coffee. You could have just offered her everything else you offered her and left coffee off the list because you don't have it.
Right. But she just is like, okay, so you needed to talk. What's up? He says that they should finalize their divorce because he's getting married in September. So, yeah, going back to how this all started, like, they're not even officially divorced, and he's already getting married.
Yeah, good times.
Rush. Her face reacts, but she kind of, like, smiles, which is a very obvious fake smile, and just responds with, K, and walks out. I kind of liked this. It was a little funny, just the way that she said K. Like, I appreciated it because it basically said, fuck you.
Well, and one thing that I'm surprised you didn't mention or notice, maybe you did but didn't mention it, as he's offering her a drink, he's kind of preparing a glass for himself with Alka-Seltzer.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't understand what the point of that was.
Well, as she's leaving, they show it still dissolving. So that entire conversation about getting a divorce happened in the span of less than one Alka-Seltzer tablet dissolving in water, which is like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Good point. The next scene, Laura is back at her house, and this is where I talked about and really noticed just this house. It is so bright, yet warm. It's well decorated. There's like unique and older architecture, pretty wallpaper, pops of color. Compared to Richard's house, which was modern, a little colder, overall darker, there were windows, but it didn't feel like there was any natural light coming in. It had to have been done on purpose, just so that in a very short amount of time, we could get a picture of who she was as a person and a mother.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Makes sense.
She kind of cleans up a few things, and then she sits at the table. She's drinking wine. There's a cross on the wall behind her. She removes a necklace, which we didn't really get to see what the necklace was, but our assumption, based on who we gather she is that it was a cross. Then, very quickly, she pulls a gun out of her purse, puts the barrel in her mouth, and pulls the trigger.
Yeah, you don't even really see the gun before she does it. You see her reaching into her purse, like below the table.
Yeah.
And you can see like the lip of her purse. But by the time you realize she's got a gun in her hand, it already happened.
Yeah.
It was very fast. Even knowing, like I said, we used Does the Dog Die? So I knew that this was how the movie started, which I wonder how much more powerful it would have been not knowing. But even knowing, it was so sudden, and it was very impactful, I would say.
Yeah, it really kind of sticks with you. Like, I'm still thinking about it.
For sure.
The camera pans around the house. There's, like I said, there's a lot of this camera work in the movie, just kind of showing really the silence in the house now. It pans back to the dollhouse, and then it fades into the next scene, which is the funeral. And Mia brought her doll, so this doll is very significant to her. At the end of the church ceremony, everyone who attended has black balloons outside that they released together. Mia had tied the doll to her balloon, but it's too heavy, so it weighs down. Kind of like in sadness and frustration, she rips the doll off from the string and just lets the balloon go and cries.
I don't love the black balloon thing, like, for my funeral, but as a scene in a movie, again, just great job by the actors and tough to watch.
Yeah. That night, Mia is crying in her bed, and her dad is trying to comfort her. She is crying hysterically, hysterically, that she is not going to go to heaven. She keeps saying that over and over. Like we kind of talked about, religion is definitely important to the family as a whole, not just the mother. And, maybe just the mom and kids. We don't really get a vibe of the dad. And actually, he does say, we don't know where we go.
I have my own thoughts on, the dad's views on religion. I think, without going too far ahead into the movie, Grace is somebody that is almost religion averse at first because of her past. And I think that was probably a purposeful choice by him, she looks a lot like Alicia Silverstone. So he went from this older woman who had these very deeply rooted religious beliefs to a younger version who actually stays away from religion now because of her past. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that was a purposeful thing for him. So I don't think he's religious at all. But again, this is just my reading into what I saw.
She says, "You don't understand." She tells him to go away, and he leaves, but the brother comes back in with some bedding. So he lays on the floor next to her and takes hold of her hand, which is just so sweet. They obviously have a nice sibling relationship.
This scene, just real quick, I said earlier that I recognize that this is a good movie, but I don't recommend it to anyone. In my notes during this scene, I actually compared it a lot to a scene from Hereditary, which is, the same category for me. Something traumatic happens, and you actually see it happen in that movie as well. And then, the next scene is somebody just kind of taking in the aftermath of that awful event. In this case, it was Toni Collette in Hereditary, where she is just like screaming and crying. She's so broken. And the two scenes were very similar to me, and maybe purposely so by the people who made it, but it's just really well done.
Yeah, and for me at this point, I'm like, I am not even watching a horror movie anymore. This is just very sad. I am sad. But like we kind of said, her acting in this was really good. The daughter, like she's a kid and she's just really great.
Incredible.
Camera flashes to the dollhouse, the painting of Mary that is in the dollhouse, by the way. The little dolls, and there's whispering. So we're getting creepy vibes from the dollhouse. We go into the dollhouse and we look at the dolls. There's like this echoing of children's laughter. At this point, I'm very intrigued as to how the dollhouse plays into this entire movie, particularly because we know that the terror side of all of this is supposed to come from Grace. So how does the dollhouse play in? So the next scene is 6 months later. It's Thanksgiving because there's kind of turkey decorations hanging everywhere. The dad proposes that they go to the cabin for Christmas. And Aiden says, "But I thought you were working." And Richard explains that he is, but only for a couple of days, and they can spend those couple of days with Grace. Aiden is like, "Nope." And the dad says, "But it's time that you get to know her. We didn't want to tell you this way, but we're getting married." So they haven't gotten married yet. It has passed September, obviously. So generous of the dad to delay the wedding.
Yeah, I guess to his credit, at least they called off the wedding. They had the good sense to do this. But I hate this already. Like, this conversation, I'm already like, I don't like where this is going.
Yeah. Aiden wraps up the conversation by saying, "It's all your fault. You left mom for a psychopath. It's in your books." He said that, I think. It's in your books. So I think the dad is like a journalist or something like that.
Yeah, so they mention it later on in the movie, too, I think, that she strongly resembles a character from one of his books or something like that. Yeah.
He also says, "Fuck you," and then storms off. But yeah, it's been 6 months, okay? And yes, the dad was with Grace before their mom died, but it's their first Christmas without her, and you're just going to be like, let's go to the family cabin where you have so many memories of your mother and us being together, and we'll just spend it with another woman.
Yeah, that was my big takeaway. Like, 6 months is not that long a time after you've lost a parent. But even if it's been 11 months, the holidays are always the worst part.
Right.
I mean, I think it's insensitive to even propose it, but obviously, in this movie, he's going to force them to go, which is just like, that's when I went off the rails, just like, fuck this guy. Whatever happens to him, he's got it coming.
I didn't take it as him forcing. I thought they agreed eventually.
I don't recall that.
Okay, well, The doorbell rings. It's Grace, but we see them through like a frosted window, and Aiden kind of watches them hug and then storms off. Then at night, they're eating dinner in silence, and Richard tells the kids that he's going out again. They say nothing. So I get the impression that Grace doesn't even come over. Like, they don't even interact together with the kids, which he's not doing a good job of integrating her at all. You can't say, okay, I'm going to keep you at arm's length out of respect for the children and their mother and what's happened, but also you're coming with us to spend Christmas together, and that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. If I don't agree with the Christmas thing at all, but it definitely shouldn't be their first meaningful time with her.
Yeah. Like, I wonder how many times they've actually met her. Yeah. I feel like they could count on one hand, that's how it feels. Richard leaves, they go into his office, and they snoop on his computer about Grace. So this is where we learn, and they learn, that she was part of a cult. Her father ran it, and there's a video of what I think is his last sermon before there's the whole group suicide, basically. The video cuts to someone walking around with the camera looking at the beds with bodies covered in blankets, And the camera person takes the blankets off their faces so that we see their mouths are covered with duct tape with the word sin written in all caps on the duct tape.
Yeah, this video is really creepy, and it actually gave me big Sinister vibes.
Sinister vibes and Blair Witch vibes. I didn't like it. It revealed the camera person is a young Grace, and she is the only survivor of the cult. Per IMDb trivia, and probably you just know this, and maybe anybody who like follows cults, but this was very much Heaven's Gate inspired, where they also had blankets covering them and stuff like that. So
yeah, and the blankets covering them, I like, just to clarify, because it was very like purposeful. They weren't like full body comforters. It was like a small square blanket that was laid over them like a diamond. So one point was between their legs, pointing to their feet, but not covering them. And then the other point was just over the top of their head, so it covered their face. But it was like a square into a diamond. It comes into play a little bit later, so I just, for imagery reasons.
Yeah, I was too scared to take that in. The dad catches them, but Aiden says something maybe about like their computer not working, I think. But they kind of act like they've been caught doing something wrong. But the dad believes them. He hopes that they'll reconsider Christmas because Grace is excited and has a lot planned. So this is where I think the next scene is them kind of gathering everything together. So I think at that point they just were like, okay, fine.
Gotcha. Maybe I was just too blinded by rage, but to me that conversation felt more like, I hope you consider having a good time at Christmas. Like, we're going to do this, so I hope you're going to, experience it. But I honestly don't know one way or the other.
Later, they're playing in the dollhouse, and inside it is a tiny, tiny jar with sea monkeys, ? Okay, it's so weird. Like, the tiniest jar because it's inside a dollhouse. They pack. So, like I said, they've agreed or have been forced. Unclear. Mia is also holding a normal-sized container of sea monkeys. And they...
Did you ever have sea monkeys when you were a kid?
No.
Really?
We had fish.
Oh, I had sea monkeys, but then somebody spilled them on our Macintosh.
What's a Macintosh?
The computer.
Oh. Who calls it a Macintosh?
That was what it was called. It was the Apple Macintosh.
Okay. That's right. I forgot. They stop to pick up Grace. She gets in the car with her, like, yippy dog, Grady. And the dad gets a call, and he takes it outside of the car. This was, like, kind of a lead-up, right? So, like, we haven't actually physically seen her face. We've seen her body a little bit, but we haven't seen her face yet. And so when she gets into the car, she's still facing forward. And then finally, she turns around and says hi to the kids. They don't even respond with a greeting. They just say nothing. They drive to the cabin, and with every kind of scene change, they're going further and further remote from the city.
Yeah, this cabin lodge is in the middle of nowhere.
Right. And that's what I wrote here. Like, there's never a reason to be this remote. It is a beautiful location, but you don't need to be this remote ever. Unless you're living out a horror movie. Everyone piles out of the car once they reach the cabin, and they go inside. Grace is left outside with the dog so he can go to the bathroom. She looks around, and there's just nothing. There's black sky because it's night, and the ground is just covered in white snow. Knowing how all this goes, which I don't quite want to say how this all goes yet, but we will. But knowing how this all goes, I think about this scene and next where she goes inside, and Richard is just kind of like, oh, there's a dog mat in the other room. You can put him there, separate from everyone, for her dog. And then she kind of lugs up the suitcase, up the stairs. She's just alone. She is with this family, these 3 people who have established relationships and rituals, and it's a holiday, so there's things that they maybe do. And he's probably treating her differently, I bet, in a way, because he doesn't want to be the same person he is without the kids, And she's just alone.
I definitely got that vibe, and I went back and forth over the course of this movie on how sympathetic I found Grace. Right after this scene, she like unpacks her stuff and she has gifts for the kids, and like, I think that's great. Like, you're really trying, but I feel like if I were in her shoes, I would voluntarily say, hey, I'm not going to do this to your kids on Christmas.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like if she knows she's unwelcome by these teenage kids, however unreasonable they're being, I wouldn't want to be there.
Yeah.
So that just kind of, for me, like, I feel very sympathetic because, like, I was just agreeing, she is super alone up here. But sometimes I'm like, well, you kind of put yourself in that situation.
Well, she also has cult family origin, so it's almost like, what boundaries does she really understand? Or You know, there's just a lot of things.
Yeah, well, at this point in the movie, we don't know how scarred she is by it. I mean, obviously we can assume she is.
She's the only survivor of it.
But I mean, over the course of this movie, you do start to get a lot more sympathetic towards her because you kind of see what kinds of things her dad taught her or made her do.
Yeah. Like we said, she lugs her bags upstairs. She opens one door and kind of peeks inside, then closes the door, and then goes into the room next to it. When she goes in, that other door opens up by itself. She unpacks her things, and that includes, like Jason said, presents for the kids, which is sweet, but, you know. On the nightstand is a photo, and we can't see the image, but it's a man and a woman. And she puts it in the drawer, which implies that it's Richard and Laura.
If they have been separated for long enough that he asked her for a divorce, he's going to marry Grace. She has now been dead 6 months. You haven't been to this lodge once to maybe take down the photos of your dead wife?
Surely not. He hasn't redecorated a single piece of this.
Yeah, that's my point. He's a dick.
He's a piece of shit. We know. Later, we see that same religious painting of Mary. It's in the dining room of the cabin. So the one that's in the little dollhouse is the same.
And this is a creepy painting. Every time they show like a close-up of this painting, I wanted to look away.
Yeah. So, but it's now in the movie where I realize that the dollhouse is the cabin. Still don't know the significance yet.
The lodge.
Yeah, the lodge, whatever. I wanted to call it cabin. I didn't want to keep saying the movie title. The painting, by the way, is a recreation of an oil painting called The Virgin Annunciate by Antonello de Messina, an Italian Renaissance artist. It was created in 1476 and depicts Mary being interrupted at her reading by the Angel of Annunciation.
I'm sorry, the Angel of Annunciation?
Yeah, I don't know what that means religiously, but I did some Wikipedia-ing to see if there was symbolism in this painting to refer to the movie, and I couldn't find anything, so.
Oh, well, it looks like the Angel of Annunciation is Gabriel, who is the angel that came to announce the birth of Jesus to Mary in a dream.
Oh.
So this was when she conceived Jesus, I guess. Gross.
A solid interruption, I guess. Worthwhile.
Giggity.
For Grace, she feels like the painting is staring daggers at her, and you can just see it in her face that she fucking hates this painting.
It absolutely is staring daggers at her.
For sure.
I don't know if I've told you this story, but like we went to a Baptist church when I was growing up, and like the basement of this Baptist church was where like the Sunday school was, where all the kids like went after the service or whatever. Well, the adults did. I don't know what the adults did, but it was really creepy. Like the basement of this church was really creepy, and there was one painting of Jesus that in particular like scared the crap out of me. And like if I had to like go to the bathroom, I had to like walk down a hallway and then like across this big empty space that was like underneath the stage where the sermon was to get to the bathroom. And like it used to just creep me out because like I would feel like I would see Jesus as a ghost down these hallways. So this religious painting, I totally get where Grace is coming from.
Was it sweet little baby Jesus though?
No. This was full grown socialist Jesus.
Oh, okay. See, socialist. He's not scary.
He was super white though.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Mia says Grace, like, you know, the thing that you say before you eat, and looks at Grace with very judgy eyes.
Yeah. This is when I start to, like, the first thing I notice, like, these kids, they're not just, like, upset, they're dicks.
Yeah.
Let's see. I said the daughter made eye contact after saying Grace. It seemed pretty aggressive to me.
Yeah, it was aggressive. And Grace's nose starts bleeding, which Mia also catches. Later that night, Grace and Richard are in the bedroom, and she's staring at one of the big crosses on the wall. Again, never redecorated. Richard asks if it bothers her because he'll take it down, and she's like, it doesn't. They fool around, and he tries to quiet her laugh, but we switch over to the kids' room, and they're just hearing every joyous moment that they're having.
Yeah, and this was definitely one of those moments where I was less sympathetic for Grace. I was like, come on.
Yeah. More into the night, we have more of those camera shots around the now empty house with everyone sleeping, but the dog growls suddenly, and there's like a shadow of something moving at the top of the stairs, but we can't really make out what it is. The next day, Grace watches from the cabin as the three of them are ice skating on the lake out front. She grabs some skates and decides to join them, but she's using 2 walking sticks because she has no idea how to ice skate. So she's making an effort. Richard calls for the kids to help her, and they skate over only to tell her that the hat she's wearing belongs to their mom, and they skate away. She rips it off her head immediately. But, like, why are you just grabbing an adult woman's hat and putting it on your head? Who do you think that hat belongs to?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I hated the dad in the movie, and my notes to this are, hey kids, give Grace a hand. Fuck you, you fucking fuck. Like, she can struggle on her ice skates. It's fine.
Right. Later, Mia has her doll propped up on like a little snowboard, and she's trying to make it board down these little mounds of snow on the lake, moving further and further out. And Grace is calling out to her, but she's ignoring her, of course. And she's trying to warn Mia of the fishing hole that's practically right in front of her. The doll falls into the hole, so Grace reaches her kind of just in time and says, like, no, I'll grab it. But the ice breaks. She falls in. Richard saves her. Next, because she fell into the water, Grace is warming up by the fire while Richard makes a call. She then goes up to their room and she takes a pill, some kind of medication. And Richard comes in, but she hides the medication bottle behind her back. He says he's not going to go to the city if she's not feeling up to it. She says, it was my idea, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Make a fucking decision, is what I want to say to this man. If you're not feeling up to it, what about what just happened means she's not feeling up to it? Nothing has changed. She simply fell in the water. She's fine. And this is just maybe him realizing this is stupid and we shouldn't be doing this. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting that invoked that response in you, because for me, it made me dislike Grace even more. I was like, this was your idea? That makes it even worse.
Yeah, you're right. So then he's like, okay, if that's how it's going to go, cool, let me show you my gun, which is just, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't really care. I mean, it makes sense to have a gun at a remote cabin, and I guess to show her how to use it, but the way the conversation went, it was just confusing. He unlocks the safe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Great
is the
code
lock.
there. Great code there. I mean, why even lock it up at that point, honestly?
And he wants to, like, teach her how to shoot, so they go outside and he shoots. He's giving her some pointers, maybe.
And, okay, just real quick here. Terrible pointers. Okay, this gun is a huge revolver, and he's like, you might want to use 2 hands, but you don't have to. You need to... She would break her wrist if she didn't support her other hand, is what I'm thinking as I watch this. Because, I mean, that's a heavy gun with those revolvers. That's a big punch. You gotta brace with that second hand for that recoil, or you're gonna have a bad time.
Well, she takes hold of the gun and shoots like 5 shots, no problem.
Yeah, she's like Annie Oakley, just like cocking it as she's firing. It's incredible.
He is simply impressed and asks no questions. I would have questions.
Oh, so many questions.
For a couple reasons. First of all, not to judge her for her past, but you know what? Especially with her past, I would want to know, when did you learn to shoot a gun? And how have we not talked about this? And also, just gender roles coming into play here. Girls are not typically taught. Like, it is not a common thing, I guess maybe depending on where you grow up, to learn how to shoot a gun. Not that it's not okay that she knows how, but it's just like, oh, I didn't know that you're a frickin' marksman.
Yeah, well, I will say, there are definitely parts of the country where it's more common for girls to shoot than here. And they don't really give any sort of location for this. Like,
no.
It's very nondescript, but you have to assume it's somewhere north because there's like 8 feet of snow.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. The dad leaves. They all say goodbye, and they kind of sound like a normal family while they all say goodbye. But as soon as he's gone, the kids go silently into the house, and she's left outside alone again. Back inside, Grace goes up to their room. She knocks on the door and asks if they want to help her decorate. She's greeted by the door locking, which I thought was really funny because, honestly, yeah, it was nice for her to ask. But whose decorations are those? Did you bring those, Grace? Or do they belong to Laura, their dead mother?
And read the room. Like, I get it. You gotta try, but maybe not try so hard all the time.
Yeah. Again, it's their first Christmas without her. And their dad isn't even here. So why would they want to do this with you? She decorates the mantle. She kind of calls out to them, and they're just continuing to ignore her. Later, Grace and Mia are in the living room, and trying to make conversation, Grace asks Mia what she wants for Christmas, and she says a dog. Trying to bond a little, Grace says that she's always wanted a dog for Christmas, but she never got any presents for Christmas because of how she grew up. Her dad lived by the Bible, which never said anything about presents. She talks about how getting Grady was symbolic for her of like her new life. He represents a separation from her past and her present. And as she's speaking, we see that on the inside of her hand is a tiny scar in the shape of a cross.
Yeah, that scar looked rough. And at this point, I'm thinking, maybe I've been too harsh on her. She obviously had a lot of trauma growing up. Eye roll.
Mia offers to show Grace what she got for her dad, and Grace is happy to oblige. She's like, cool, we're bonding, this is great.
Yeah, and before you say what it is, like, I thought so too. I was like, oh, you know what? She's extending an olive branch. This is a great move by her.
Yeah.
But turns out she's an evil genius.
Correct. It is a DVD of their family. So Mia, her mom, brother, and dad, married, ice skating at the cabin. It's very happy, wonderful, beautiful family of 4. Grace leaves the room.
Yeah, without a word, which is... That's a fair reaction.
Yeah, and it seems like Mia kind of looks over and she doesn't really understand why. Like, what? This is just a DVD. What's wrong? Later, Grace tries Aiden again, offering dinner, but he ignores. She eats alone, nearly in the dark, looking at her plate and the painting. She switches seats so that she has her back to the painting. Whenever we look at the painting, there's always this kind of whispering happening, as though the painting is very haunting. She kind of just feels like it's watching her, so she actually takes down the painting.
Yeah, and I felt like from the end of like the gift scene to this, you kind of get the sense that Grace is really unhappy being there and maybe thinks that she shouldn't have done this, but like also it's way too late to be having that thought. But like, I don't know if you got that, but I definitely got that from her in the previous scene and this scene, just like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, well, she's officially alone with them. Like, she doesn't have her buffer. She takes a shower, and when she comes out, there's a topless scene, and that is relevant, which is the only reason why I'm saying
Not just topless, like full partial frontal nudity.
Full partial frontal nudity, yes.
Absolutely.
She goes to the mirror, and the steam causes past things on the mirror to come up, and it's a heart with the word mom in the middle of it. She wipes it away.
Is it past, though, or was it maybe done while she was in the shower?
Maybe. Ooh, maybe. And when she does wipe away the vapor, is that what we call it? Steam. We can see that someone is watching her. It's Aiden. After she goes into Aiden's room, he's not sleeping, and I don't know, does she know that he's not sleeping? I don't really know.
No, so like when she sees him in the mirror, he disappears really fast. So then like she opens the door, I feel like, to look, and it looks like he's sleeping. So I think she tells herself it wasn't Aiden, but then is like, yeah, it was Aiden.
Yeah. But what she does find in the room is like a shrine to their mom.
Yeah, with a couple burning candles, and
she blows out the candles. Yeah, it is creepy. It wasn't, but it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in the context of the ending, it was probably purposeful.
Yeah. More shots around the dark house. Dog notices something again, and now the music changes to like, bring, bring, and a figure appears in the room. And I hated it so much. And Jason missed it, so we had to watch it like 2 more times. But also, it's Grace, right? I didn't put this together until I was lying awake last night in bed thinking about it, but it's Grace.
Yeah. I think it's Grace just like playing this like harpsichord that they have down at the end there.
No, not the music.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, she was playing those notes on the thing.
No.
100%.
It sounded so scary. Are you kidding me? Okay, I was wrong. What a surprise. It is her playing an instrument in the middle of the night. But I think it's because she's sleepwalking, right?
Yeah, I definitely got the feeling she was sleepwalking. And just for the record, the only reason I wanted to check to see if that's what it was is because I thought it would make it less scary for you to know that it's her playing an instrument, but turns out it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. It still looks scary. So she goes into the kids' room. They're sleeping together in the same bed, and she walks like she's not awake. The bed changes to the bed from her cult days. So it's a dream. And she wakes up. It's morning. She's on the floor in her bedroom. She's like confused, I guess. And she pulls out her suitcase. I don't know if it seemed like she was looking for something, but she pulls out her suitcase and in it she finds Mia's doll. At the same time, pretty much, Mia calls for Grace saying that she can't find her doll.
So at this point in the movie, I had a thought and I wanted to know if this had crossed your mind. The doll. Is the doll her mom? Because the doll house is the lodge.
Oh my God, yes. Yes.
Yeah, this was when I realized it. So the doll was her mom, and she found her mom doll under her bed, which is creepy.
Yeah. Ooh. They go looking for it, and Grace suggests that it's in the room with Grady, but Mia says she never goes in there. And Grace says she'll check anyway, which she does. And, oh, look at that. Grady had it. She plays it off like Grady must have thought it was a toy.
I wasn't sure when I watched the scene, like, if Grady actually had it, or if she just kind of, like, did the, is there a quarter behind your ear trick with it? Because she found it under her bed that morning. So right. I think she just kind of was like, oh, look, I found it. Here it is.
Well, yeah, exactly. Grace takes another pill, and she calls Richard just to kind of update him, saying everything is swell, even though it's not really. Later, her and Aiden are in the kitchen, and she's making a sandwich. She offers to make him one, but he's wearing headphones and ignores her. Eventually, he says that he'll make his own, and she walks over to him very decidedly and says, things are uncomfortable, and I'm wondering what we can do to make it better, or what your problem is. Yeah, his problem is he's stuck here with a stranger, and his mom is dead. Yeah. And it's Christmas.
Yeah, she's definitely at this point feeling the isolation, feeling very, alone. So I get that she's upset, but, like, what's your problem is not a fair question when you know what the exact problem is, and it's you.
Exactly, yeah. He says he doesn't want to talk to her, and she snaps a little, saying, you don't want to talk, but you want to watch me in the shower? I just want to make things better. Not making it better. Next, Grace and Mia are watching TV. So it's almost kind of like, it feels like Mia has come around enough to be in the same room as her, it feels like.
I actually have a fun note about the movie they're watching.
But yeah, I thought what they're watching is awful, but you kind of explained what it is.
That movie that they're watching is The Thing. It's the beginning. In the beginning of the movie The Thing, for those of you who haven't seen it, it takes place at, like, an Antarctic base, and a bunch of people are there, and this thing is hunting, tracking them, and it can change shape or take whatever form it wishes. So the scene we see is a doctor stitching someone up, and he's like, I wonder why they were shooting at that dog. And what they're talking about is in the beginning of the movie The Thing, there are a bunch of scientists fleeing this station, chasing after a dog, and they yell something to them in Norwegian that isn't ever translated in the movie. But what they're actually saying is that that dog is not a dog. You need to get away from here. So basically they're warning them about what's going to happen. And if you're watching this movie and you happen to speak Norwegian, you know. The only reason I mention that is because this is what I wrote in my notes, and I think it really comes into play at the end, is that movie is The Thing. Fun fact, in that scene, they're shooting at the dog and shouting in Norwegian that it's not really a dog. But the people in the movie don't understand that, and they all end up dying to the thing. And I said, I wonder if that's foreshadowing that something isn't what it looks like. I wonder.
Aiden brings her a mug of hot cocoa, and she says, is that for me? And he's smiling, and she very happily takes it. So this is literally like, I'm sorry, olive branch, here you go, it's fine. Later, Mia says she's cold, so Aiden offers to grab the gas heater. Later, Grace starts covering her nose with her sweater and asks if using the gas heater is safe in the house, and Aiden says it always smells like that. Randomly, the photo of Mary falls from, like, wherever she had put it, and they switch movies to Jack Frost. Kind of flashes a couple times in static.
And that's Jack Frost with Michael Keaton, not Jack Frost, the early 2000s horror movie about a killer snowman.
Right.
I feel like on this podcast, of all places, we do have to specify that.
I forgot about that scary snowman movie. Grace falls asleep and wakes up in the middle of the frozen lake. She falls into the lake because the ice breaks, and as she struggles, her father begins pulling her down.
Yeah, this is a terrifying nightmare.
Yeah. She wakes up again and is on the floor of the living room, so it was another dream. She grabs her phone, and despite it being plugged in all night, it's dead. There's no electricity. She tests the water. There's no water. The kids were also asleep in the living room, and she tells them that, all that stuff is out. Aiden offers to turn on the generator, and then he comes back saying that it doesn't work. She asks him where the gas heater is that he had brought up and if he moved it, but he says no. Then she realizes all the decorations are gone, and she asks if this is a joke. Mia calls them into the kitchen because the fridge is also empty. And now Grace, still thinking it's a joke, she says, I'm going to go to my room, and when I come back, all the food will be back and everything else. And as she walks back through the house, she notices the painting has returned to its original spot on the wall.
Creepy.
When she gets back to her room, all of her stuff is gone, including her medication. She returns to the kids saying, I need my pills. Where are my fucking pills?
And I will say, like, as we were watching this scene, like, at first I'm like, yeah, the kids definitely did it. But then when she's, like, going through the drawers in her room, those drawers are so loud. They're, like, old wooden drawers.
Yeah.
And, like, when she pulls them out, they're just like, "Rah!" And I'm like, there's no way the kids are going to be able to do that and not wake her up.
Exactly. Yeah. They argue, and Aiden says, like, you know, it escalates. And he eventually says, well, you're the one walking through the house all night. And she's like, what? So she doesn't even realize, I guess, that she's sleepwalking.
So at this point, my main theory is that Grace sleepwalking is hiding the things. Because people do weird stuff when they sleepwalk.
That's true, yeah. She says she's going to find her things, starting with their room. And when she gets there, all of their stuff is gone too, including Mia's doll. Grady is gone as well. They search for him far and wide, to no avail. The nearest town is miles away, so they're basically stuck there. Plus, with the current blizzard, the roads could be closed for days. For dinner, they eat like a bowl of canned beans.
And you were very alarmed at the amount of beans they were eating.
So many beans.
Because you said that if they were stuck there, they were eating too many beans.
Yes, you need to ration.
Okay.
They didn't even try to ration.
I think I would probably literally die of starvation before I ate a cold can of baked beans.
That's pathetic.
Yeah. It'd be counterproductive. I'd throw it up.
Mia eats barely any, so she wastes it before leaving the table.
Survivalist Briana is really mad right now.
When she leaves, Aiden says that he had a weird dream last night that the gas heater had started smoking and they all suffocated to death. Just a casual nightmare.
Yeah, and he's just like, so it's so he waits. He's like, I didn't want to say anything while Mia was in the room.
Yeah.
But like he says it like conspiratorially, like they're friends, and this, you know, I'd already decided like there's no way the kids are doing this, but this actually raised my alarms a little bit. I'm like, this seems fake to me.
Later, Grace prepares another bowl of beans with crackers on top, and she notices the date on the clock reads January 9th. So she goes and turns it back to December 22nd. Then she leaves the bowl outside for Grady. Listen, we know the dog dies. I mean, obviously, but they've only searched once. They didn't search long enough. He's a small white dog. They're not looking enough for him.
I agree. They gave up on that dog way too fast. I will also say, I don't think you mentioned it, January 9th is the date of the cult suicide.
Okay. Was that in the articles or something that they saw? I figured it had to have been the date. It's also AJ McLean's birthday from the Backstreet Boys. A fact that will never leave my brain, as will neither the rest of their birthdays. But
What's Kevin's?
October 3rd.
Okay, thank you. Continue.
Like, God. It was too close to the 22nd, so I just figured maybe they were like playing with time a little bit, or, you know, the ghost, whatever. When she goes back inside, it is the date. Oh, he checked Kevin's birthday. I was correct. 1973. Great. I'm so proud of myself. When she goes back inside, she asks Aiden if he messed with the clocks, and he asks why, but she doesn't respond because she's distracted by a sound, which is Mia laughing and talking. She runs up the stairs and into their room and grabs the phone out of her hands, and she says, "Your phone is working?" But it's not. Mia says, "I was just pretending. I really miss Dad." Grace hands her the phone back. And I feel like an apology was in order here, but, you know, she just answered the phone back and that's it.
Yeah, actually, I wrote down here, at least say sorry, Grace. Yeah. Jesus.
Honestly. And this, again, is where I feel like, how old is Mia? Is she 7? Is she 12? I don't know. She doesn't act her age.
I also wrote in this scene, I believed that she was doing this purposefully. I said, I don't believe this child. There's no way she was actually playing. She did that purposefully. She's evil AF.
Yeah, she was being really loud about it. Later, Grace is using a bowl of melted snow that was heated over the fire to, like, wash off in the sink. The steam rises on the mirror, and the mirror says, "Repent." There's a flash to the dollhouse. The sea monkeys are dead. The living room of it has the figure, like the dolls in it, set up like they're dead, similar to an Aiden's dream. And then we zoom in on the painting, and it's like, did the Virgin Mary do all of this? Is she the one?
That zoom in was so unsettling. It was so hard for me to keep my eyes on the screen.
Yeah, I hated it.
You just wanted to look away.
That night, Grace is in bed staring at the giant cross. Her father's sermon can be heard, like, in her head, ? She takes down the cross, and then Mia bursts into the room. How about a knock? She says she heard a noise, so they go exploring with a flashlight.
She actually said she heard a voice.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought she was hearing her father's sermon going, repent your sins, repent your sins. And at this point, I thought maybe Mia had heard that sound too.
They kind of go exploring with a flashlight. That door that opened on its own when Grace first arrived suddenly opens wide. And as they approach, you can hear the wind roaring, and she comes back and she's like, it's just the wind. More into the night, Grace keeps hearing her father, repent your sins, and she's panicking as she kind of moves through the house with a flashlight. She has the gun and makes her way to the kids' room. As she looks at their beds, church music is playing, and their beds become the cult scene again. And she's shaking as she pulls back the sheet off of one of their faces and cries when it's Aiden, dead like the cult with sin written over his mouth and the duct tape. But then we hear Aiden calling her name. So then we see what's actually happening, which is Grace sleepwalking, and they're shaking her to wake her up. And Grace accidentally pistol whips Mia because she is holding the gun for real. And Mia's like cut and bleeding.
Yeah, and there goes any goodwill you had. If she had built up any goodwill to this point, it is gone when you pistol whip the child.
Downstairs, the clocks have returned to January 9th. Grace tells them to pack up and that they're going to walk to the nearest town to call Richard and get her medication.
And that's like just a death sentence.
Yeah, Aiden's like, no way. She doesn't even bother arguing, though, and she just says she'll go. So she does. She leaves like with a backpack and a blanket over her. And she walks across the lake, right? She's walking across the lake.
Yeah, it looked like that, yeah.
Try the driveway. There is a trail. I know it's covered in snow, but there is a separation of trees that will eventually lead to a road. Try that.
Yeah, I definitely think that just further illustrates she was not in her right mind when she made this decision.
Yeah. And there's whiteout conditions. Like, she can't see anything.
Yeah, there's actually like snow dunes that looked like a desert.
Yeah.
It was really cool looking, honestly. I'd never want to see that in person, but it was cool.
She approaches a very Weasley-like house. It literally looks like three houses on top of one another.
Well, I'm sorry, can you just explain what Weasley means for people who think you might be referring to the animal?
Well, you know, Ronald Weasley from Harry Potter.
Yes, thank you. The Burrow, it's called.
Yes, thank you. The first level is like a square, the second is a rectangle, and the third level is kind of like a regular house with a pitched roof. And there's someone inside. You can see someone moving inside, but we don't get a clear view. The figure is reminiscent of her father. She bangs on the door and yells, "Hello," but no one comes. My notes here say hallucination, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yeah, I also thought, I said, that building is 100% a hallucination.
Yeah. She walks away and she finds tracks, so she follows them. It seems like she thinks these are going to be helpful, but I'm wondering if they're her own.
Yeah, that's what they were absolutely her own tracks.
And they were, because it leads back to the camp or the cabin, and she doesn't seem happy about it. Her nose is bleeding again. She finds something buried in the snow, like right at the house. And what she finds is a photo frame of the kids. And the frame says, "In loving memory." Which is just a weird, cheesy frame to have anyway, I think.
Spoopy.
She goes inside and Aiden says, "What does it mean? What if we died?" And Grace disputes that, saying, "It doesn't make sense because my feet are cold and I'm hungry." And he says, "Maybe that's what it is. We wouldn't know if we died." And God, I hope if I ever become a ghost, the default feeling is not cold and hunger. What a disappointment.
Yeah, if this is the afterlife, just forget it. And this also, for me, seemed like it came a little out of left field from Aiden. He had that dream that he mentioned, and then all of a sudden he's just like, what if we died in real life?
Yeah. I can't remember if I was thinking that at this point or not, though. Or did I ever think it on my own, or did I only think it because they suggested it? I can't remember. But I kind of like the idea of it. We'll talk about it more. We cut to the dollhouse. The boy figure is hung in it. Grace puts the cross back up on the wall. You can really see that there's like emotional weight with her putting this thing back on, but she obviously thinks it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, I think maybe at this point she's like, I've clearly offended somebody somewhere and I need to just fix this.
Yeah. Once again, that night, Grace lies awake hearing her father's voice as we pan around the house, and it's great. She's not sleeping. She's triggered. She has no meds, no sleep. This is a solid combo happening. Next day, she's looking out the window, and we see the Weasley house again. That same person can be vaguely seen. Her father's sermon is heard. But again, this house isn't real, so it's a confusing scene. But he's saying, the father, "It's time to open the door. God is calling."
Throughout like this whole sequence, there's actually like a 15-20 minute stretch where I wrote no notes because the whole thing was so surreal, and like I felt so in it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, if my jaw, like I literally was staring at it with my mouth open for a good few minutes. And this was part of that. It's just the whole thing just feels like a really, really bad dream.
There's a cut to her outside crying and deep breathing. Then she goes inside and finds the kids praying over something. She grabs it, and it's a newspaper printout with their 3 obituaries on it. Her and Aiden yell at each other because he keeps screaming, "You have to repent for your sins." And she's screaming and begging him to just shut up. She throws the paper into the fire, and he runs off saying, "I'll prove it." Things are escalating quickly.
Very quickly.
Later, Mia screams for Grace. She runs upstairs and opens the door that leads up to the attic to find Aiden has hung himself, but he's not dead. He says, "See, we must confess our sins, confess." She runs away and starts compulsively praying over the painting of Mary, begging to protect her.
And even just listening to you talk about it, that was probably the most haunting scene of the movie for me.
Yeah, it was a lot. She hears her father's voice and takes the painting and throws it. She screams and runs off. So she has just officially had a breakdown, basically. The camera, however, goes to the attic. There are straps on the floor and a speaker. And I wrote, is that a speaker? Are they actually doing this to her?
Yeah, I wrote, oh my God, what if the kids are just playing the video through the vents? They're complete psychopaths.
Yeah. Next, Grace is outside on the lake on her knees, moving around in a circle and repeating things to herself. The kids are inside. They're watching from a window, and what they're watching is her walking and holding something. And you can tell even from afar that it's Grady. He is dead. She cradles him and sits on the steps, but Mia runs out crying and saying she's so sorry, like it's her fault, I'm so sorry. And I really think losing the dog, which was her anchor in reality, was absolutely the last straw.
Yeah, well, also, she said earlier that Grady was symbolic of her new life. And then she made all these decisions, and now Grady's dead. And now that is a sign that she has strayed from the path, and she needs to repent her sins.
Mia and Aiden are sitting in bed together whispering. Mia says she's going to freeze to death. Aiden says, I know. We have to convince her of something. We have to stop this. So, yeah, they're doing this. These children are absolute psychopaths.
Absolutely psychopaths. And I do want to say, though, just to be perfectly clear, Grace being the victim of this does not mean she's still not a shit person. I think just everybody in this movie sucks.
I disagree.
I knew you would, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
We'll talk about it.
But yeah, so now that we've made that big reveal, right? We know the kids are doing it. So, let's talk about some of the things that they might have done.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So when Aiden brought her that cocoa, it was probably drugged.
It was absolutely drugged because they later say, should we give her more sleeping pills?
Absolutely. So I think that theory of I thought she was sleepwalking. I think she was sleepwalking a lot and doing things, but it was caused by this.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I also wonder, I think she was triggered going into this anyway, and there being so much religious symbolism everywhere probably didn't help. And then, she didn't have her meds, so it was probably just a great little concoction, all of it mixed together, not helping. I will say, after the way that this movie started, I was not really excited to watch this. And I told you, I said, I don't want to see these kids be tormented by something that has nothing to do with them. It's this other woman's past. But I also was like, why would her past ghosts decide to torment her in a place that has nothing to do with her? So I was confused, but that's all I was. I was not clued in. You actually said in the beginning, before anything even happened, are they, is it ghosts or is it going to be the kids? I don't know. And I was like,
I said, I don't remember that at all.
You said that I think maybe even before we started watching. I don't know.
I don't recall that at all, to be honest with you.
But I was like, no, they're children, please. And again, in my brain, Mia is 7, so she is just innocent. But I think that was intentional. I think this movie did a fantastic job at painting these kids as victims. The dad is unlikable. There's nothing, he seems removed completely from the loss of his ex-wife, and he's unreasonably forcing his kids to move on at inappropriate times, being the holidays. There's, I said, an innocence to the kids, because Mia's age really is unclear. Maybe I'm the only one who feels that way, but I think it was done intentionally. And this is where I looked up their ages. I had thought maybe Aiden was 14 or 15. He's 14. No, for reference, he is 16 in the movie. But he like plays with his sister a lot. They played with the dollhouse. Like, what teenager, 16-year-old is like, yeah, I'll play with my little sister in the dollhouse. It's just, so I think they were intentionally made to seem innocent so that all of these moments were overlooked.
So you said you looked up their ages. How old is Mia supposed to be? Does it say?
It doesn't say. I looked up their actor ages.
Oh,
yeah, I couldn't find
gotcha.
anything about this.
I misunderstood.
Just my own theory, yeah. Yeah, so other moments, we find out later eventually that Mia was lying about the phone. Like, her phone was working the whole time. So she was caught talking to her dad. And she just played it off as pretending. Do you have any specific little Easter eggs?
No, I said earlier, I would starve to death rather than eat those baked beans. Like, they had like a whole treasure trove of food somewhere, clearly. And they were just snacking away while she's just eating can after can of shitty beans.
Right. Well, and the dollhouse itself, too. So the movie begins with the dollhouse, as we said. And that tells us something from the start. Like, this is what they're showing us first. So that's supposed to mean something. But it also gets lost because maybe you just think, okay, the cabin is the dollhouse, whatever. But we keep going back to the dollhouse and we keep seeing the dolls set up in a certain way. That was them. The kids did this. When the kids were playing with the dollhouse before they left, before they packed, this was them planning what they were going to do to this woman.
Absolutely. And then they, maybe when they were using their dad's computer, maybe they printed out these, the newspaper thing that they clearly made.
For sure. They took the clip and they made voice clips based off of that and just played the tape repeatedly.
So much prep. And, again, these kids are obviously terrible people that are, they're damaged. But these kids have obviously done awful, awful things, but whole situation would have been avoided if Dad wasn't such a bag of penises. Just saying.
And I do wonder what was going through their minds as children. Like, let's say children, they don't think about everything. Where did they think this was going to go? Did they really think they would just get grounded and everything would be fine? Like, this is major. Let's say what ends up happening, which obviously we'll get to, doesn't happen, and they just say it's a prank and everything's fine. You're grounded for life, at least.
I think, like, for the kids, not to use it as an excuse, but I don't think that they thought that far ahead. I think this was more just them, like, lashing out in pain. They very much and maybe somewhat rightfully blame their dad for their mom's death. I say somewhat rightfully because, again, mental illness is real and you can't expect one person to fix that. But regardless, because of the way things played out, they blame their dad for this death and they blame Grace by extension, and they're just lashing out. I don't think they really have an end game in mind. I don't think they think this is going to make her leave forever. I don't think they think Dad's going to let them get away with it, but I also don't think they think it's going to drive her off a cliff, which it does.
There were multiple times where they should have stopped this.
Oh, 100%.
When she was carrying a gun around the house and accidentally pistol whipped the child, we could have stopped it there. When she insisted on leaving the house alone to walk miles and miles in a blizzard, should have cut it there.
Absolutely. I don't disagree. I'm just saying I don't think that they were thinking about the outcome at all. I don't think it even began to cross their minds.
Well, a lot did cross their minds because they go into the basement and they find all their stuff that they had hid. It's like behind in a little alcove. Also the pipes could have burst in this house. There was no heat going. There's so many consequences to what they've done. They try to encourage her to come inside. Aiden tells her that he didn't hang himself. None of it was real, but she's too far gone. She says, "We're all sinners on earth. May the Lord forgive us so we can be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven."
Amen.
Meanwhile, they try to restart the generator, but it doesn't work. And
for realsies this time.
For realsies.
Because I think earlier Aiden probably didn't try it.
Yeah. And it's probably meant to be that. Like, I feel like the generator's supposed to kick in right away, and so he probably broke something. Aiden asks Mia for her phone, but it is dead now, and she says, "Sorry, I spent too much time talking to Dad."
I will say, the one thing that this movie gets right is, like, this is exactly how it would go if these kids planned it. Like, this is how 14-year-olds do evil plots.
Right.
And just end up getting everybody killed anyway.
That night, Grace is still outside with the dog. Mia suggests giving her another sleeping pill. And as they're talking, they hear Grace come inside and find her in front of the fire. She has wood on the floor that's been pulled out of the fire, and she kneels over it. She screams in pain and falls off, but she goes back again and prays because of the harm she believes she's brought on this family. She screams in pain like all night while the kids are just listening to her screams, doing nothing.
I think at this point they're huddled in the attic together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next, Richard is at the house and he sees the dollhouse all set up with its horrors, and he gets in the car. I feel like it's weird, but he knows something is happening. But why would you assume your children are psychopaths? But he does.
What I took from this is maybe he saw the Aiden hanging.
Yes, I know, but still. Like, I'd be like, that's fucked up, but I wouldn't think, oh, my kids are tormenting my girlfriend.
No, maybe he thought Aiden killed himself.
Maybe. Yeah, that's right. He leaves a voicemail for Grace saying that he couldn't get through all day yesterday, but he's coming now. The kids are in the attic hiding from Grace, but Mia has to go to the bathroom, and she sneaks around, but upon coming back, she's caught.
Yeah, and Aiden makes a great point here. He, like, before she goes, he's like, you can't go down there. Just find a corner. And she doesn't even respond to that. She just continues to go downstairs.
Yeah.
Again, this is what happens when children are in charge.
She runs back to her brother, but Grace follows. And she is walking like when she was sleepwalking, but she's not asleep. I want to say she's awake, but she's not awake in the way that she normally would be.
Yeah.
Mia is crying, telling her to go away. She has the gun, and she also has Mia's doll.
And she also has, like, burn marks on the tip of her nose and her lips.
Yeah, was it burn marks or frostbite?
I thought it was burn marks from, atoning for her sins.
Yeah.
Because I don't think she had those marks when they first brought her inside.
Right, yeah. Aiden tells her, we aren't dead, we were just pretending. Well, no, you were gaslighting her to death, but okay, you were pretending. Grace holds up the doll, telling Mia that we have to free ourselves from our idols. And Mia begs, but she sets it on fire. She then cocks the gun, but Richard arrives with a honk of the horn.
This is all his fault. I'm sorry. Maybe leaving them alone in the blizzard in the middle of nowhere wasn't a great idea.
Well, he's going to get what's coming to him, Jason.
Yeah,
it's fine. Richard runs into the house, up the stairs, part way until he sees Grace and the kids at the top of the stairs in the hall. And she says, Richard, God is punishing us for what we did. She puts the gun to her head, but he tells her not to do it. And she says, you don't understand. I'm already dead. She shoots herself, but the gun, what is it when the gun doesn't work? Stalls?
No, it was an empty chamber.
Oh, yeah, right, because it's a revolver.
Yeah, it's a revolver. Chamber. She pulls the trigger, it clicks, and nothing happens. And I just want to point out, as Briana goes through the next events, me writing that the dad shouldn't have left them alone in the middle of nowhere was my last note until the end of the movie, because I was just spellbound. This entire sequence was really intense. It was really well done. But again, don't watch it. I have no desire to see it again.
Yeah. She says, I told you. And he tries to talk to her, but she shoots him. And he falls back onto the landing. The kids run over to him crying, but he's dead. Aiden grabs the keys and they run. Now what we see is just her kind of walking down the stairs. She moves very hauntingly. And we can hear what's going on outside, which is like the engine stalling. Mia screaming for him to go. Finally, you can hear that they do go. But he hits something. As we hear the engine failing again, Mia is screaming that she's coming. So she's now outside. And we see her go outside. We get a glimpse of them outside. They're stuck in the snow, so they can't even go anywhere. The next shot is a long shot of the blood on the landing from Richard. His body is gone and there's a trail of blood, and we can hear Grace praying. They're all at the dinner table, including Richard, propped up at the head of the table. The painting of Mary is back up despite the frame being broken. The kids are whimpering and Grace is singing. It's very haunting. The kids join weakly, kind of because she looks at them
and the song, for anybody who grew up going to church, was Nearer, My God, to Thee.
Thank you.
I don't ever want to hear that song again.
No. It goes on for a while. And
real quick, though, great voice on Riley Keough.
Yeah,
I guess it's in her genes. So. She sang great.
Yeah. It goes on for a while of her singing. I kind of felt it like it was too long. I wanted this to be over. And we're watching the kids, and then Aiden whispers, it's okay, as Grace puts duct tape over Mia's mouth with sin written on it. We see that her mouth is covered too, and she covers Aiden's, and that's the end.
That's the end.
Like we've said, a great movie. that we never want to see again.
Yeah, I love the ending to this movie. This was just such a great movie. I will never watch it again, but I really, really appreciate it. Like I said, I don't recommend it, but if you feel you have a particularly strong stomach for some of those triggers, then go for it.
Yeah, it wasn't at all what we expected. We definitely thought it was going to be horror, and it was a psychological thriller. My question with the ending is like, who are we supposed to feel for? And we've talked about this back and forth already, but I think it's kind of a lesson in like good and evil is not black and white.
Yeah, I mean, I would say everybody except the dickhole dad
yeah.
is sympathetic. You do feel for the kids, even though they've done these awful things. You feel for Grace, even though she has made some selfish decisions. You really sympathize with them, even though they did these terrible things. So I think that's a great point by you.
Yeah, as I watched the movie, I hated the dad the whole time. That's clear. And you're meant to. You're meant to not like the dad. And there were moments of not liking Grace. But in rewriting my notes, which I always do, I really had a hard time rewriting any of those moments where I was disliking Grace, because I was like, I know how this ends, and I do feel like she is a victim in the end here. With all of her traumas and everything, there's no way that she can respond in any other way. Like, they drove her to this.
Oh, yeah, she's absolutely a victim. But I mean, bad people can be victims too. Or at least people can make bad decisions that cast them in an unfavorable light and then still be victims, which I think she's guilty of.
Do you think Aiden is a sociopath?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I think there's a chance both kids are, but I didn't really give it a lot of thought, to be honest with you. You think he is?
It's hard. There was kind of an article that was like the significance of the dollhouse and Aiden being a sociopath, and they were very much biased against him. And I don't quite see it as so clear, but this is hella dark to even plan to do to someone.
Yeah.
Gaslighting someone to this magnitude is fucked up.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, it's funny now that you say that, I do think they did show how strong a reaction Mia had to her mother dying. And that I don't think they ever showed Aiden having that kind of reaction. So maybe that was purposeful.
Yeah, this article actually points out that Aiden doesn't cry at the mother's funeral, but I just took that as being like boys crying, public emotion, yada yada yada. We're trying to turn the page on boys, it being okay for boys to cry, but like we haven't fully turned the page. And he was trying to be strong for his sister too, I felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to get too much into my personal trauma here, but the day that I lost my dad, I didn't cry.
Yeah,
I didn't. I had to be strong for other family members, and I certainly cry a lot about it all the time, but not the day it happened, so that actually never even crossed my mind.
Yeah, I try not to judge characters in death-related moments, because you don't know. Death is so weird, and how you react to it is very personal and unique, and it doesn't make sense to judge a character based off of just that alone.
Absolutely. I always like when people are talking about somebody being a bad character or something, and they mention they were laughing the day that their younger brother died. It's like, okay, well, you're right. Like people process stuff differently.
Right. What do you think of the idea of what if this had ended with it being purgatory instead? Would you have liked that ending?
If the movie were exactly the same as it were, and that were the ending, I don't know if I'd like it. I think they would have kind of had to hold back on a couple of those moments of Aiden forcing it to make it more of a gradual thing. Because like I said during that conversation that you had with Grace, I felt like his theory just kind of came out of nowhere. So I feel like if it were like that, it would just seem a little too, I don't want to say convenient, but a little too just this is what it is. But, if they had built up signs like that dream, if we saw that dream,
yeah,
and then, they kind of exposed it slowly in other ways, I might be down with that ending. But this movie, as is, that ending would not satisfy me at all.
I think it would have definitely lost its uniqueness and power, and it certainly gives me Lost triggers, which I never like.
As I was answering that question, I was thinking about Lost.
But it is a much lighter ending. And for me, who hasn't seen 1,000 scary movies, I feel like I would have been okay with that ending.
I mean, this ending was really dark. And I will say it also plays into your point that you made last week about Sinister. It is heavily implied that these kids, they die, right?
100.
They're dead,
yeah.
But they don't show it. Which is exactly what you said last week on Sinister. You know, we can put them in these situations and we can imply that it happens, but you can't just show it.
Yeah, I actually found an article that was like analyzing the ending of The Lodge. What actually happened? And I was like, they're fucking dead. Like, what else happened?
Yeah, I don't understand.
There's nothing to analyze.
I don't think you can walk away with too many questions other than maybe wondering how many of those middle scenes were dreams or real or like hallucinations, how much of it was Grace, how much of it was a kid's. But like as far as the resolution to the story, it's iron. Like there's no question.
Right. So normally I go through reviews, but we've kind of talked a lot and we've talked a lot about our opinions and things like that. I will say the reviews were back and forth. I found one that was 4 stars. I found one that was like 3 stars. There's elements that people liked. There's elements that people didn't like. I find that personally there was nothing I didn't like about this film. I mean, you know, we don't want to watch it again, but that doesn't mean we didn't like it.
Yeah, it really did a great job. Like at the end of the day, we watch horror movies to be uncomfortable, which is a weird thing to say, but that's the truth. You know, that's why you want to watch a scary movie, is to be taken out of that safety of your comfort zone. And this movie did a really good job at that. It really made me uncomfortable. It made me that is something that can turn off a casual viewer, because if you don't know what you're walking into, you're like, man, I just wanted to like watch a funny slasher, and now I'm, you know, watching these kids process trauma.
Yeah.
I get how it's divisive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it just really played with like mental illness and paranormal, and like what you're seeing isn't always what's happening, which it probably feels that way with mental illness and definitely the paranormal.
Yeah. And that makes me think that the shot with the thing was definitely foreshadowing.
Oh, yeah. Once you explain that, because you didn't explain it to me before, I was like, oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I saved that for the pod. As I was like typing it, I was like, I have the best factoid for you when we talk about this. But I made her wait in suspense.
All right. So let's give our scores here. What's your jump score for this?
My jump score was 8. There weren't many, but none felt cheap, and they were all really good.
We use our jump score differently. I gave mine a 2. I was scared, but then after a while, I started kind of figuring things out a little differently, I guess, and it just didn't feel scary in the same way.
Totally fair. I get that. All right. What about your nightlight index?
My nightlight, I'm going to say 6, because I was lying awake thinking about it last night. And it wasn't because I was scared. It was because I was heavy, I guess. Like, it's just heavy. Riley, that's her name, right? Riley? Mm-hmm. We are not getting across how well she acted this role and how much it turned from me not liking her and thinking of her as the other woman to an absolute 200% victim in all of this. And yes, she kills the children in the end, but she is still a victim. And that is 100% credit to her and her acting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a bad performance in this movie.
Right.
Yeah.
What's your nightlight factor?
It is an 8 for me. As I mentioned last week when we watched the Sinister thing, I have a particular thing about drowning. So that drowning nightmare that she had made me, like, just talking about it makes my chest feel really tight. And the image of Aiden hanging there and opening his eyes and just being like, see, we're not dead. It's staying with me. It's definitely something I thought about last night. So, all right. So what about your scores?
Do your horror buff score.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a 9 for me. It was a solid 8 before the ending, but the ending was just so well done, so well executed, and it just really made me love it even more. So this is a 9, and again, just I know I just said it, but those kids were amazing actors.
Yeah.
And they really carried this film.
My Scaredy Cat score was a 5, because, you know, more than halfway through, I guess, we realized this wasn't a horror movie, so it started feeling a little different.
Yeah, I think, if I'm not mistaken, right after we turned off the movie, you were like, well, I'm not scared, so that's good.
Yeah. Neophyte score, though, is an 8. Yeah, this was a really good movie. Yep.
Yeah, right on. Glad we agree on that. Again, right. Don't watch it, ever.
Yeah.
But great movie.
Also, again, not a holiday film.
I did just realize, like, literally at the end of last week's podcast, we told people, we're watching The Lodge. Why don't you watch it, too? What if we just scarred, like, the 15 people that listen to this podcast?
Yeah, I forgot. We do tell you to watch it, huh?
Sorry, guys.
So sorry.
Yeah.
So sorry. Okay, but we are watching a seasonal movie next week, and that is Krampus.
Krampus!
I remember the previews for this. I don't know what to think. I don't even know if I'm scared or what. I don't know. But I'm hoping for some great holiday music throughout, like some jingle bells and...
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember the music because why would I? There are only 2 scary movies that I remember the music from, and that was Sinister and It Follows, which we will watch eventually, and you will also love the music. But anyway, I've seen it. It's fun. This is a fun one. It's not quite like, at full out fun like our next week, our real Christmas special, but it is a fun movie. It's definitely, I don't want to say tongue-in-cheek or satire. It's not quite Scream, but it's almost like Scream, where it's pretty self-aware.
Okay, all right. I like that.
Yeah, it's a fun movie.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing /following /liking all of our social medias at Go a Little Mad Pod. And please, if you haven't followed or subscribed, please do. And please leave us a 5-star review. We would much appreciate it. And we'll be here next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, even if you hate us, just tell your friends. Tell your friends how much you hate us so they can listen to us and hate us too.
Yeah, we love a good hate listen.
Absolutely.
We want hate listeners.
I want all listeners. Hate listeners, love listeners, like listeners, indifferent listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All the listeners.
As long as you're listening, I do not care if you like me. Thanks, guys.